"Rancher, do you only want something from me like everyone else?" The Apache widow demanded. The sun hung low over the wide desert, casting long shadows across the ranch lands. The heat of the day still lingered, making the dust rise from the dry soil. At the edge of the small town, a rancher rode slowly along the rugged trail that led to the outskirts where the land met the wild hills. His horse moved with a steady, confident rhythm, knowing the path well. The rancher, a man in his mid-30s, had a face lined by both sun and hard work, and eyes that seemed to see the world honestly, without pretension or false promises. His boots were worn from years of walking through rough land, and his hands were calloused from long days of tending cattle, fixing fences, and keeping the ranch running. He was heading into town for supplies, but a part of him wanted more than just tools and grain. Word had reached him of a woman who lived alone on the land just past the hills, a widow from the Apache tribe, whose life had been filled with hardship. The locals spoke of her cautiously. They warned him not to get too close, not to try to persuade her or make promises she would regret. "She trusts no one," a storekeeper had said with a shake of his head. "After what she's been through, no one is good enough. Not anyone from outside, not even those who mean well." The rancher had listened quietly, nodding, but inside he felt a quiet curiosity. There was something in the idea of meeting someone who had lived through pain and loss and still carried herself with dignity. He did not know what he would say, or even if he should say anything at all, but a part of him knew he needed to see for himself. As he rode closer to the widow's property, he noticed the careful way she had arranged her land. There was no extra decoration, no unnecessary flourishes, just practicality and order. The fences were sturdy, the small garden neat, and the house, though modest, was well cared for. It was clear that every piece of land had been tended with attention and pride. He could sense the strength it would take to maintain such a place alone, and he could see why people admired her courage even from a distance. When the rancher arrived at the edge of her property, he dismounted slowly. His horse nickered softly, sensing the tension in the air, and he patted its neck. The rancher's boots crunched on the gravel as he walked toward the house. From inside, the widow had been watching him from behind a partially closed window curtain. Her dark eyes narrowed slightly, cautious and wary. She had seen many men come to her doorstep, each with their own reasons, each leaving behind broken promises or demands. She had learned to protect herself, to rely only on her own strength and instincts. As the rancher approached, she stepped outside, folding her arms over her chest. Her stance was firm and unyielding, a subtle challenge. The rancher paused a few feet away, giving her space, raising a hand in a gesture of greeting. "Good evening," he said softly, his voice steady and calm. "I hope I'm not intruding." The widow's eyes studied him carefully. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "And why are you here?" she asked, her voice direct, leaving no room for small talk or excuses. "Do you only want something from me like everyone else who has crossed my land?" The rancher smiled faintly, not a smirk, but a gentle expression meant to show sincerity. "No," he said simply. "I'm not here to take and I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm a rancher from the other side of town. I've heard about you and, well, I wanted to see if I could help in any way. That's all." The widow's lips pressed together as she measured his words. There was something about his tone that was different. Unlike the others, he did not appear hurried or anxious. He didn't look around for hidden treasures or try to charm her. He simply stood there, calm and patient, as if waiting for her to decide if she wanted to speak further. "I've had help before," she said cautiously. "Some tried to take advantage of me. Others promised to be my friend and then disappeared. What makes you any different?" The rancher nodded, understanding her skepticism. "I can't change what others have done," he said, "but I can promise that I'm not like them. I don't expect anything in return. I only want to offer support if you need it." For a moment there was silence. The desert wind rustled the dry brush, carrying with it the scent of sage and sun-baked earth. The widow's gaze softened slightly, though her caution remained. She studied him for a few long moments, then finally spoke. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've lost or what I've had to endure. How can I trust you?" "Maybe you can't," the rancher said quietly. "Maybe trust has to be earned, and that's okay. I'm not asking for it right away. I'm willing to wait, and I'm willing to show through my actions who I am. Words aren't always enough." The widow considered this, her heart feeling both wary and strangely curious. She was not used to people speaking so honestly to her. Most tried to impress her with words to convince her of their intentions. This man did not. He spoke with a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from experience and integrity. "Then maybe," she said slowly, "you can start by helping with something small. Nothing personal, nothing that matters too much yet. Just show me that your words mean something." The rancher nodded. "I'd be happy to, whatever you need." And so their first cautious interaction became the beginning of a tentative understanding. Over the next few hours, the rancher helped with minor chores around her property, stacking firewood, fixing a broken fence post, and checking the water troughs for the animals. He moved carefully, respecting the space she had carved out for herself, never overstepping or asking questions that felt intrusive. The widow watched him work, noticing the steadiness of his hands, the care he took with each task, and the quiet way he treated the animals as if they were important companions rather than mere livestock. She found herself wondering silently whether it was possible that some people really could be genuine. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting golden and orange light across the land, the rancher stood up, wiping sweat from his brow. "I should be going soon," he said. "The day has been long and I don't want to impose any further." The widow nodded. "You haven't," she admitted. "It's unusual having someone show up and not want something from me. I'm not sure I know how to respond to that yet." "That's okay," the rancher replied with a small smile. "There's no rush. Trust takes time and I'm willing to wait as long as it needs. I'll come by from time to time only if that's all right with you." She studied him again, the desert wind tugging at her hair. There was something quietly compelling about this man who had appeared on her land without expectations, who had done small deeds instead of grand gestures, and who had left without demanding thanks or gratitude. She could not deny the curiosity that stirred inside her, nor the faint flicker of hope that maybe not everyone was after what he could take. "All right," she said finally. "You may come by, but understand this, one wrong move and I won't hesitate to ask you to leave. This land, this life, it's mine and I will protect it. Do you understand?" The rancher nodded firmly. "I understand completely, and I respect that." With that, he mounted his horse once more, tipping his hat in a quiet gesture of farewell. He rode off slowly, leaving the widow standing at the edge of her property, her eyes following him as he disappeared along the trail. The wind stirred the dust around her boots, and for a moment she allowed herself to hope that perhaps not all strangers came with ill intentions. That night, as the desert cooled and the stars appeared one by one, the widow sat by her small hearth. She reflected on the day, on the man who had come to her land and not tried to take advantage. She realized she had felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, an unusual sense of calm, paired with curiosity. There was no guarantee of anything yet, but for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if trust could grow again, even in a life that had been shaped by loss. And far away, the rancher returned to his own property, thinking of the widow's strong eyes and cautious words. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, that patience and understanding would be required in equal measure. But he also knew that some connections were worth the effort, and this one, fragile as it was, felt like it might be. The first meeting had ended, but neither of them could forget it. The seeds of trust had been planted, tentative and delicate, but alive. And in the vast, open desert where life was often harsh and unforgiving, even the smallest spark of hope could grow into something enduring. The days after their first meeting passed slowly, each carrying the same quiet tension that lingered between them. The widow went about her routine, tending the small garden, feeding the animals, and maintaining the fences. She worked with precision and care, as she always had, but her mind often wandered back to the rancher who had appeared on her land. His calm, steady presence, the way he had worked without demanding anything in return, lingered in her thoughts like a soft echo. Meanwhile, the rancher returned to his own property, yet he could not shake the image of the widow's strong, cautious eyes. He respected her space and her need for independence, yet he felt a quiet pull, a sense that this meeting was not just chance, that perhaps they could offer each other something meaningful. He knew he could not force her trust, nor would he ever try. Actions, he reminded himself, always spoke louder than words. A week passed before he rode toward her property again, this time carrying some extra supplies. A new set of nails for the fence, a few tools that might help with repairs, and a small bag of flour he had picked up from town. He did not announce his arrival, but as he approached the edge of the widow's property, he saw her working by the garden. The sun was warm and the air carried the scent of fresh soil and herbs. "Good morning," he said softly, tipping his hat. The widow glanced up, her eyes wary, but she did not immediately speak. She studied him silently, noting the lack of expectation in his expression. He did not smile too broadly, did not try to charm her. He simply stood there, offering a greeting and nothing more. "Morning," she said cautiously. "I see you brought things, tools, I think." "Yes," he replied, holding out the bag. "I thought these might help with the fence and any repairs you need. No strings attached." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll take them," she said. "But I'll see for myself whether they are useful before I decide how much I like them." He chuckled softly, a warm, low sound. "Fair enough. That's the right way to judge anything. Let's see what you need help with first." Over the next few hours, they worked side by side. The rancher handled the heavier tasks, lifting boards and hammering posts, while the widow organized tools and prepared the nails. Neither spoke too much at first. The quiet was comfortable rather than awkward. Occasionally, a small comment would pass about the strength of the wood, the direction of the sun, or the way the soil needed tending. But for the most part, they let the work speak. As the sun climbed higher, a gentle breeze lifted the widow's hair from her face. The rancher noticed the fine lines of concentration on her forehead, the careful way she measured and checked each board. He admired her skill, her diligence, and the quiet pride she carried in her work. "You do this often?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I've learned to manage things myself. Since my husband passed, I've had no choice. Everything depends on me." "I can see that," he said. "It's impressive the way you manage so much alone." "Most people would struggle to keep it all together." She looked at him, a flicker of emotion passing over her features. "I don't know if I want to be impressed," she said carefully. "I just have to survive." The rancher nodded. "Survival is admirable, yes. But sometimes surviving doesn't mean you have to do everything alone. There's nothing wrong with letting someone help." Her eyes met his, a quiet challenge in them. "Most people who offer help expect something in return. I've learned that the hard way." "How do I know you're different?" He paused for a moment, considering. "You don't know yet," he said honestly. "And that's okay. You'll see over time. I won't force anything, and I won't ask for more than you're willing to give. I just want to be someone you can count on if you need it." The widow nodded slowly, absorbing his words. She didn't fully believe him yet, but there was a small part of her that wanted to. She had spent so many years protecting herself, building walls around her heart and life, that the idea of trusting another person felt foreign. Yet something in the rancher's calm presence suggested that perhaps trust could be earned without pressure. As the afternoon moved on, the rancher suggested a break. They sat in the shade of a large tree, sharing water and quiet conversation. The widow told small stories about her late husband, not the full grief, but glimpses of the life they had shared. She spoke of the simple joys, the difficulties, and the lessons learned. The rancher listened intently, offering empathy and understanding rather than advice or commentary. "You seem to listen differently than others," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I try," he replied with a gentle smile. "People have stories worth hearing. I don't need to fix them or change them. Just listening can mean more than anything else." For the first time in a long while, the widow felt a sense of ease in another's presence. She didn't have to be on guard, didn't have to measure every word or gesture for hidden meaning. It was a small but significant relief. When they returned to work, the rancher helped her lift a heavy board into place. Together, they secured it to the fence post. She noticed the strength in his hands, but also the careful attention he gave to avoid harming the wood or her hands. It was a subtle gesture, but it spoke volumes about his character. By the end of the day, the fence was repaired, the garden was tidy, and the small barn was more organized than it had been in weeks. The widow looked over the results, and for a brief moment she allowed herself a small smile. She did not speak of gratitude, but her satisfaction was visible. The rancher packed his tools, preparing to leave. "I should head back," he said. "The day has been long and the sun will set soon." The widow regarded him silently for a moment, then nodded. "You've been helpful." "That's all I can say for now. I'll see you next time." "I'll be here," he said simply. "Whenever you need, or even if you don't, I'll respect your space." That evening, the widow sat by her hearth, reflecting on the day. She realized that her walls were still there, but cracks had begun to form. Not because she had let someone in fully, but because she had witnessed actions that spoke louder than words. She understood deep down that trust was not something given lightly, but it could be earned over time with patience and sincerity. Meanwhile, the rancher returned to his own ranch, thinking about the widow's quiet strength. He respected her boundaries and knew that she would not allow just anyone into her life. But he also felt a quiet determination to continue showing her, through actions rather than promises, that he could be counted on. Over the next few days, the rancher found small opportunities to check on her land. Sometimes it was fixing a broken water trough, other times carrying supplies from town. Each visit was brief, respectful, and unobtrusive. The widow watched from a distance, observing his consistency, and her curiosity grew. She did not allow herself to feel attached, but she noticed how different he was from others. During one visit, a minor accident occurred. One of her animals, a young horse, had tangled its hoof in the fence. The widow rushed to help but struggled to free it alone. The rancher arrived in time, calm and methodical, gently freeing the horse without causing it pain. She observed his care and patience, and for the first time she allowed herself a flicker of gratitude to surface in her heart. "You could have hurt yourself," she said quietly, her voice a mixture of concern and acknowledgement. "And I could have let the horse struggle and get injured," he replied. "We did what needed to be done, that's all." The simplicity of his words and actions struck her. He did not seek recognition, nor did he expect praise. He had acted because it was right, not because it served him in any way. Slowly, she began to see a man who could be trusted, not through empty promises, but through consistent, thoughtful behavior. By the end of the week, the widow found herself anticipating his visits, though she would never admit it openly. There was still caution in her eyes, still the instinct to protect herself, but it was tempered by curiosity and a growing sense of hope. She realized that not everyone was after something from her. Some people were genuine, and perhaps, just perhaps, they could help heal the spaces left by loss. The rancher, too, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had not rushed anything, had not tried to push himself into her life. Yet through patience, respect, and quiet acts of kindness, he was beginning to form a connection that was real, solid, and meaningful. He understood that trust could not be demanded, only earned, and he was willing to wait as long as it took. The desert days moved on, each marked by sunrises and sunsets, work and quiet reflection. And in the midst of it, two people, wounded in different ways, were slowly, carefully, building the fragile beginnings of trust. It was a slow process, delicate and uncertain, but alive with the possibility of something stronger than either had felt in a long time. The first barriers had been tested and held. The walls were still there, yes, but cracks had formed in the right places. And as the rancher rode away from her property that evening, the widow allowed herself a thought she had not entertained in many years. Perhaps some people really could be trusted. The wind shifted that afternoon, carrying a faint smell of smoke over the hills. The rancher was riding toward the widow's property, unaware of what awaited him. He had noticed the sky darkening slightly, but the desert often had sudden gusts that stirred dust and leaves without warning. Today, however, the air felt heavier, charged with an unfamiliar tension. When he reached the edge of the property, he noticed her standing near the barn, her hands on her hips, scanning the horizon with a concerned expression. Behind her, a thin column of smoke rose in the distance, curling upward like a warning. The rancher spurred his horse closer, slowing as he reached her. "Something's wrong," the widow said immediately. "I thought I smelled smoke, but now I see it." "The hills, it looks like it's close." The rancher nodded, his expression turning serious. "We need to check quickly. If it's a fire, it could spread fast in this dry season. We need to act before it reaches the ranch." The widow's eyes narrowed. "I can try to move the animals, but it will take time. I don't know if I can do it alone." "You won't have to," he said firmly. "We'll do it together." The rancher dismounted and moved toward the stables. He began helping the widow lead the animals out one by one, starting with the smaller ones. She had feared this moment, feared the unpredictability of fire and disaster, but seeing him calmly handling the situation gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. His hands were steady, his voice calm, and his presence solid, like a pillar she could lean on. Smoke began to drift closer, carrying with it the sharp scent of burning wood and dry grass. The widow's throat tightened as she watched the flames nibble at the edges of the far hill. She had faced hardships before, but the thought of losing her land, her animals, and the life she had built brought a fresh surge of fear. The rancher noticed her unease. "We'll get through this," he said, not as a promise he could make lightly, but as a statement of determination. "We'll get everyone safe first, then we'll figure out the rest." Together, they worked quickly, guiding the horses, goats, and cattle to a safer enclosure farther from the fire. The widow marveled at how naturally he moved, how he seemed to know instinctively how to calm the animals and keep them from panicking. She realized that his help was not just physical, it was emotional, a steady hand in a moment of chaos. By the time the last animal was safely secured, the flames had grown larger, moving closer to the fence line. The widow stepped back, wiping sweat and ash from her forehead. "It's worse than I thought," she said. I don't know if I can save the rest of the property." "You don't have to do it alone," the rancher replied. He quickly assessed the situation, noting which areas were most at risk. "We can create a fire break, move some materials, and prevent the fire from spreading further." She nodded, her respect for him growing with every word and action. For years, she had been taught to rely only on herself. Yet here was someone who had not judged her, who had not asked for anything in return, and who now stood beside her in a crisis without hesitation. The two worked side by side, dragging boards and wet blankets to create barriers, shoveling dirt to slow the flames, and directing the animals away from danger. The widow noticed how carefully he moved, always keeping her safety in mind as much as his own. Every action was deliberate, and every word offered calm and reassurance. Hours seemed to pass in what felt like moments. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ranch. Sweat mixed with ash on their skin, but they did not pause until the immediate danger had been mitigated. The fire had been kept at bay, and although some grass and shrubs had been lost, the core of the ranch and the animals were safe. The widow finally allowed herself to breathe. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice soft with relief. "Don't," the rancher said simply. "Seeing everyone safe is enough. That's all I need." She studied him quietly, noticing the exhaustion in his posture, the slight streaks of ash on his face, and yet the calm resolve in his eyes. He had put himself at risk, yet he did not speak of it as heroism or courage. To him, it was just the right thing to do. For a moment they stood in silence, the smoke still rising from the distant hills. The widow felt a wave of emotion she had not expected, gratitude, relief, and something else, a warmth she had not felt in a long time. She realized that this man had not only protected her property and animals, but also something far more fragile, her sense of safety and trust. I have been so cautious," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have built walls around myself and I've trusted very few people, but seeing you today, I can feel that maybe some people really do care." The rancher smiled faintly. "It takes time," he said. "Trust isn't something that comes overnight, but it can grow. And sometimes people show it not in words but in what they do." She nodded, thinking of the hours spent working together, the way he had guided the animals, handled the fire, and stayed calm under pressure. His actions had spoken louder than anything he could have said, and they had left an impression she could not ignore. As night fell, the rancher prepared to leave. He had stayed longer than he initially planned, making sure everything was in order. The widow walked with him to the edge of the property, her footsteps crunching softly on the gravel. "You didn't have to stay so long," she said. "You could have gone back to your own ranch. You could have left me to manage." "I could have," he said quietly, "but I didn't. I wanted to make sure you were safe, that's all." The widow studied his face in the fading light. She realized that she had begun to see him differently, not just as a helpful neighbor, but as someone who could be trusted, someone who had proven through action that his intentions were genuine. "You've shown me more today than anyone has in years," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You've shown me that not everyone wants something in return, that some people really do care." "I hope that's true," the rancher said. "I only know that I've done what I could. The rest is up to you, whether you choose to let it mean something." For the first time in a long while, the widow felt a sense of calm and safety. The fire had tested more than just their land and animals. It had tested her willingness to accept help, to trust another person in a moment of vulnerability. And in that test, the rancher had proven himself not just capable, but genuine. As he rode away under the deepening sky, the widow watched him disappear along the trail, feeling a quiet shift within her. She still had walls, still had reasons to protect herself, but she realized that sometimes it was okay to let someone in, to rely on another human being. Not everyone wanted something in return. Some people simply acted with integrity, patience, and kindness. That night, as she sat by her hearth, the widow thought of the day's events. She remembered the way the rancher had stayed calm, his hands steady, his mind focused on what needed to be done. She remembered the way he had looked out for her and the animals without seeking praise. And she remembered the quiet words he had spoken, reminding her that trust takes time, but it can grow if nurtured patiently. For the first time in years, the widow allowed herself to hope, not just for the safety of her land and animals, but for the possibility that trust and connection could exist again in her life. The rancher had shown her that trust could be earned through action, not just promises. And in the stillness of the desert night, under the stars that stretched endlessly above, she realized that a new chapter of her life was beginning, one in which she might learn to accept help, to accept care, and perhaps even to allow herself to trust another person fully. The days after the fire were quiet, but the calm carried a new kind of tension, one filled not with danger but with emotion. The widow had returned to her routine, tending her land and animals, but her thoughts often drifted to the rancher. She remembered the way he had stayed calm during the fire, the way his hands had guided the animals, and the quiet determination in his eyes. Something about him lingered, a presence that refused to leave her mind. The rancher continued his visits, always respectful, always patient. Sometimes he came to help with chores, sometimes he simply rode by to check if everything was okay. Each time, the widow observed him carefully, measuring his intentions, weighing her own walls against the gentle persistence he showed. She was cautious, but slowly, a subtle curiosity began to replace the fear and suspicion that had dominated her life for so long. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the rancher arrived with a wagon loaded with firewood. The widow had been struggling to gather enough for the coming cold nights, and though she would never admit it, she had been hoping for help. She watched from the barn as he unloaded the wood with steady hands, stacking it neatly by the hearth. "You've done this before," she said quietly, approaching him. "Many times," he replied with a small smile. "It helps to keep the home warm and safe." "There's something satisfying about it, too." She nodded, folding her arms over her chest. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wood, smoke, and earth. Then slowly she said, "I've been thinking about the fire, about everything. You didn't have to stay. You could have gone back to your own ranch, but you didn't." "Why?" He paused, leaning against the wagon, considering his words. "Because it was the right thing to do. You were in danger and I could help. I didn't think about it as a choice. I just acted." Her eyes softened slightly and she took a step closer. "Most people don't act like that," she said. "Most people want something in return. They want a control to take. I've learned that the hard way." "How do I know you're different?" The rancher met her gaze calmly. "You don't know yet, and that's okay. I'm not asking you to trust me fully right now. I just want to show you that some people do care without expecting anything in return. I hope that's enough for now." She looked down at the ground, thinking about the weeks that had passed. She thought about the fire, the way he had helped without hesitation, and the small acts of kindness he had shown over the days. Slowly, she began to realize that he was not like the others. His words matched his actions, and that consistency mattered more than anything else. Maybe it is enough," she said finally, her voice soft. The rancher nodded, sensing the small breakthrough. "That's all I'm asking for," he said. As the days passed, their bond continued to grow, slowly and naturally. They shared small moments, repairing fences, gathering water, tending to the garden. During these quiet times, the widow began to speak more freely, telling him about her late husband, the life they had shared, and the challenges she faced alone. She spoke of grief and fear, but also of pride and resilience. The rancher listened without judgment, offering empathy rather than advice. He shared some of his own stories too, not of hardship, but of lessons learned, of mistakes made, and what they had taught him. She noticed the honesty in his words, the way he never exaggerated or pretended to be something he was not. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and red, they sat by the small river that ran through the property. The widow had brought a simple basket of food, and the rancher had carried water. The air was warm, and the gentle sound of flowing water created a sense of peace neither had felt in a long time. "I haven't done this in years," she said quietly, looking at the river. "Just sitting and watching the water. My husband and I used to come here sometimes, but it's been so long that it almost feels like a memory I can't reach." The rancher nodded, offering a reassuring smile. "Sometimes memories are strong because they matter. But it's also okay to make new ones, to live in the present and let the past be a part of you, not a chain that holds you back." She looked at him, her eyes searching. "And what about trust?" she asked. "How do you know I won't push you away, or that I won't let my walls stay up forever?" "You don't have to let go all at once," he said. "Trust grows step by step. I'll be patient. I'll be here as long as you're willing to let me." For the first time, the widow felt a flicker of hope that perhaps she could allow someone into her life again. She had been so careful for so long, guarding her heart against disappointment and betrayal, that the idea of opening up seemed almost impossible. Yet with him it felt different. There was no pressure, no rush, only a steady, quiet presence that offered safety and understanding. Over the next few days, their connection deepened further. They shared laughter over small mistakes while tending the animals, quiet conversation while repairing fences, and moments of silent understanding while working together. The widow began to notice the little things, the way he remembered details she had mentioned, the way he respected her space, the way he treated her animals with care and patience. One afternoon, as they worked on a broken gate, the widow tripped on a loose board. She fell to the ground, twisting her ankle slightly. The rancher was immediately at her side, helping her to sit and checking her ankle. "You should have been more careful," he said gently, concern in his voice. "I am careful," she replied, trying to mask her pain with a small smile. "Sometimes accidents happen anyway." "I know," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder for support. "But I'm here to help. Let me help you." She looked at him, realizing for the first time that asking for help did not make her weak. It did not mean she had failed. It meant that she could accept support when it was needed, and that trust could be shared without fear. She allowed him to help her to her feet, leaning on him slightly as they made their way to a chair in the shade. "You're different," she said softly, almost to herself. "Not like the others." He smiled, a quiet, understanding smile. "I try to be. I don't expect anything in return. I only want to be someone you can count on." The widow nodded, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of connection, of realizing that not all people were out to take. Some people acted out of kindness and integrity, without ulterior motives. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, they sat together on the porch of her home. The fire burned gently in the hearth, casting a soft glow across their faces. The widow watched him, noticing the quiet strength in his posture, the patience in his eyes, and the sincerity in his smile. "I've spent so many years alone," she said quietly. "I thought I would always be this way, cautious, protective, never letting anyone close, but you've shown me something different. You've shown me that maybe, just maybe, it's possible to trust again." The rancher reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. "It is possible," he said. "It takes time, patience, and understanding, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." She looked at him, a mixture of caution and hope in her eyes. "I'm not sure how to do this," she admitted. "How to let someone in without losing myself." "You don't have to lose yourself," he said softly. "You can keep who you are and still allow someone to care. That's the beauty of trust. It doesn't take away your strength. It adds to it." For the first time, the widow felt a sense of relief and possibility. She realized that her walls were not a prison. They were a choice she had made to protect herself. And now, she had the power to let someone in carefully, to allow connection without fear. As the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, the widow leaned back in her chair, her hand still resting in his. She felt a quiet sense of peace, knowing that she did not have to face life entirely alone. The rancher had proven, through actions and patience, that he could be trusted, that he could offer support without expectation, and that he could help her rebuild not just her property, but her sense of security and hope. And in that moment, she allowed herself to hope, for trust, for connection, and for the possibility that life could offer more than survival. It could offer companionship, understanding, and the quiet, steady presence of someone who cared without demanding anything in return. The days following the emotional breakthrough were calm in a way that felt different from before. The widow's land was in order, her animals fed, and the fences repaired. Yet there was a new energy in the air, one filled not with fear or caution, but with quiet anticipation. She found herself noticing small things about the rancher that she hadn't before. The gentle way he moved when handling the animals, the quiet humor he showed in small moments, and the patience he always extended without expecting anything in return. The rancher continued his visits, arriving at different times, sometimes bringing supplies, other times just checking in. Each visit was steady, consistent, and unobtrusive. The widow observed him from the window or the porch, measuring her walls against his calm presence, slowly realizing that she could trust him in ways she had not allowed herself to trust anyone in years. One morning he rode in with a cart full of fresh produce from town, vegetables, fruits, and some small items she had mentioned needing. He greeted her with a soft smile. "Good morning," he said. "I thought these might be useful for the week." The widow studied him, noticing the thoughtfulness behind his actions. "You didn't have to," she said, a small smile breaking through her usual reserve. "I wanted to," he replied. "It's not about obligation, it's about helping when I can." She nodded, realizing how different he truly was from anyone she had encountered before. His help was not an excuse to ask for something in return. It was simply genuine. Over the next few days, they worked together as usual, tending to the animals, repairing small structures, and preparing for the upcoming cold nights. During these shared tasks, the widow began to open up more. She told him stories about her family, about her childhood, and about the values she held close. The rancher listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. He shared pieces of his own life as well, small memories, lessons learned, and the challenges of managing his ranch alone. One afternoon, they were repairing a section of the fence near the river when a sudden gust of wind knocked over a large branch, narrowly missing the widow. The rancher reacted immediately, pulling her out of the way and steadying her. She looked up at him, heart pounding from the scare, and realized just how much she had come to rely on his presence. "You're always so careful," she said quietly, almost in wonder. "I pay attention," he said simply. "I want to make sure you're safe, that's all." For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the warmth of being cared for without suspicion or fear. She realized that trust, once earned, could grow into something more, a bond that went beyond mere friendship or assistance. As the week progressed, the widow began inviting him into more aspects of her life. She asked for his advice on planting new crops, on maintaining the irrigation system, and even on minor repairs around the house. Each time, she felt a growing sense of partnership, realizing that sharing her life did not mean losing control. Instead, it meant gaining support from someone who genuinely cared. One evening, as the sun set in a brilliant display of oranges and purples, they sat together on the porch, sipping water and watching the animals graze in the fading light. The widow turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. "I never thought I'd feel like this again," she said quietly. "I thought my life would always be about surviving alone, about keeping everyone at a distance. But you've shown me something different. You've shown me that trust can exist, that support can be real, and that someone can care without asking for anything in return." The rancher nodded, his expression calm and steady. "I'm glad you see that. I only hope my actions continue to match my words." Trust is fragile, but it can grow if nurtured patiently. She looked at him, a mixture of gratitude and admiration in her eyes. "It has grown," she said softly, "more than I expected." From that moment, a new rhythm settled into their lives. The rancher continued his visits, each one reinforcing the bond they had begun to build. They shared laughter while repairing fences, quiet conversation while tending the garden, and moments of silence while observing the sunset or listening to the gentle flow of the river. The widow found herself anticipating his visits, not out of dependency, but out of a genuine desire to share her day and her thoughts with someone she trusted completely. One morning, After a particularly cold night, the widow invited the rancher inside to help stoke the fire and warm the house. It was the first time he had entered her home fully, and she felt a mixture of nervousness and trust. He moved with respect, careful not to touch anything unnecessarily, yet contributing in small, meaningful ways, stacking firewood, checking the stove, and offering a few quiet suggestions for improvement. "You feel at home here," he said softly, glancing around. "I do," she admitted, "but it's still new, it's not something I'm used to." "That's okay," he said. "Home is not just a place, it's the people and the trust you build around it. You've built a strong home here, and now there's room for someone to share it with you." The widow looked at him, feeling a surge of emotion she had long suppressed: relief, gratitude, and a quiet sense of hope. For the first time, she felt that life could be more than survival. It could be partnership, trust, and even companionship. As the seasons slowly changed, the widow and the rancher worked together to improve the property further. They repaired old structures, planted new crops, and cared for the animals with renewed energy. The rancher's presence became a constant, not an intrusion. He shared in the small joys and victories, and she began to realize that her life had changed in ways she had never anticipated. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the stars began to appear, they sat on the porch together, looking out over the land. The widow turned to him, her eyes reflecting the soft light of dusk. "I never thought I'd be able to trust someone like this again," she said. "I was so sure that everyone had their own agenda, that no one would be genuine, but you've proven me wrong." The rancher smiled gently. "I've only done what anyone should do. I respect you, your life, and your choices, that's all." She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure and peace. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for helping me, but for showing me that people can be different, that trust can exist, and that life can offer more than survival. You've given me hope again." "And you've given me trust as well," he replied. "A chance to be part of something meaningful, not by taking, but by sharing. That's rare, and I don't take it lightly." For the first time in years, the widow allowed herself to truly relax in another person's presence. She had built walls to protect herself, but now she realized that letting someone in did not mean losing herself. It meant growing, trusting, and sharing life with someone who valued her strength as much as her heart. The next day, they worked together as usual, tending to the garden and caring for the animals. The widow felt a quiet contentment as she observed him moving with ease and purpose, guiding her animals gently, offering advice when asked, and simply being present without expectation. She realized that this was the kind of partnership she had longed for, not one of dependency, but of mutual respect, trust, and support. As weeks turned into months, their bond became undeniable. They laughed together, worked together, and faced challenges together, each moment reinforcing the trust and understanding they had carefully built. The widow began to see her life in a new light, realizing that she was no longer alone in her struggles. She had someone beside her who genuinely cared, someone she could rely on, and someone who had earned her trust through patience, respect, and quiet action. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills. The widow turned to the rancher, a soft smile on her face. "I never imagined my life could feel like this," she said. "Safe, understood, and even hopeful. You've changed that for me." "I'm glad," he said, taking her hand gently. "It's not just me, though. It's the trust you've allowed me to earn, the openness you've shown. That's what makes this real." She nodded, feeling a sense of completeness she had not known in years. "I'm ready," she said quietly. "Ready to accept that life can offer more than I thought, and that trust and companionship are possible." The rancher smiled, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the sunset. "I'll be here always beside you, as long as you want me." And in that quiet, golden moment, the widow realized that her life had entered a new chapter, one filled with trust, partnership, and hope. She had survived loss, built her life carefully, and guarded her heart fiercely. But now she had found someone who respected her, supported her, and showed her that life could be shared without fear or expectation. The desert around them was calm, the stars emerging one by one in the night sky, and the gentle breeze carried with it the promise of many days to come. Together, they faced the future with trust, understanding, and a quiet joy that neither had expected but both now cherished. The widow smiled, resting her hand in the rancher's. For the first time in years, she felt that she was not just surviving, she was living. And she knew that with him by her side, she could face anything, not with fear but with courage, trust, and hope.